All right, team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton. Delighted to have your company with me once again for a look at strategy in leadership. And we're going to be taking some lessons from a classic text, which is Sun Tzu's The Art of War, which I have right here, absolute classic, and certainly many leadership lessons to be learned from that book. But what we are going to do, as we often do, is we're going to have a look at a real-world example to set the scene a little bit. And I'm going to stick with the business world. I was very, very keen to see if we could find any corporate examples where a leader has taken Sun Tzu's principles from The Art of War and applied them in a real world setting. And I think we've managed to find a really good example from that world. So without further ado, here we go. And this is specifically focusing on the energy principle from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. So this excerpt is called Winning Without Fighting, How Airbnb Redefined the Battlefield. When Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia first launched Airbnb, they were two struggling designers in San Francisco who were barely making rent. Their idea was almost laughably simple, and that was to rent out an air mattress in their apartment to help them pay the bills. But what they didn't know at the time was that they were about to demonstrate one of Sun Tzu's most profound leadership lessons from The Art of War. And that was that in battle, use the direct to engage and the indirect to win. In the late 2000s, the hotel industry was massive global chains with decades of infrastructure, brand loyalty, and billions in assets. Competing directly with them would have been suicide. Building hotels, hiring staff, and chasing regulations, they didn't have the money or the connections or the time to do that. So instead of attacking head-on, Airbnb changed the terrain. They created a digital marketplace that connected hosts with spare rooms to travellers who were looking for something to stay in. It was a self-reinforcing ecosystem, a flow of energy, and not just brute force. Every host who listed a room became part of Airbnb's supply chain, and every traveller who booked became a part of its marketing force. And that is, in essence, Sun Tzu's energy principle at work. He taught that a great leader doesn't win by overpowering the opponent. Instead, you win by redirecting momentum. And those actions create conditions so favourable that victory becomes almost effortless in the best case scenario. Airbnb didn't own any hotels. It owned the relationship between traveller and host. It didn't fight for market share. Instead, it created a brand new market. And within a few short years, without even a single building being owned by Airbnb, that company was valued higher than even the largest hotel chains in the world. As Sun Tzu wrote, he who understands how to use both the direct and indirect approaches will be victorious. Such is the art of maneuvering. Airbnb's founders never outspent or outmuscled their rivals. They instead outmaneuvered them. And in doing so, they proved a timeless truth. And that was that in leadership and in business, you don't always have to fight the battle that everybody else is fighting. Sometimes the smartest move is to change the battlefield entirely. Very interesting example from the corporate world, and a relatively new addition to that brand landscape as well, I suppose you could say, with respect to Airbnb. But what I wanted to do was read to you the excerpt from The Art of War that directly applies to that situation, because it is, I think, very revealing. Now, it's chapter 5. I recommend you get a copy of this if you can. And the chapter is called Energy. It's a short one, okay, but there's some very useful principles, and you'll see how this concept of energy and choosing your battles essentially played straight into Airbnb's chosen course of action. Here we go. Sun Tzu said, "The control of a large force is the same principle as the control of a few men. It is merely a question of dividing their numbers. Fighting with a large army under your command is no ways different from fighting with a small one. It is merely a question of instituting signs and signals, i.e. communication in the leadership realm and in the corporate world. To ensure that your whole host may withstand the brunt of the enemy's attack and remain unshaken, this is affected by maneuvers that are direct and indirect. That the impact of your army may be like a grindstone dashed against an egg, this is affected by the science of weak points and strong. In all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle, but indirect methods will be needed in order to secure victory. Indirect tactics efficiently applied are inexhaustible as heaven and earth, unending as the flow of rivers and streams. Like the sun and the moon, they end, but to begin anew. Like the four seasons, they pass away to return once more. There are not more than 5 musical notes, yet the combination of these 5 give rise to more melodies than can ever be heard. There are not more than 5 primary colours, blue, yellow, red, white and black, yet in combination they produce more hues than can ever be seen. There are not more than 5 cardinal tastes, sour, acid, salt, sweet and bitter, yet combinations of them yield more flavours than can ever be tasted. And finally, in battle there are not more than 2 methods of attack, the direct and the indirect, yet these 2 in combination give rise to an endless series of maneuvers. Now, I don't know when this book was written off the top of my head, but it was a very, very long time ago. And the wisdom contained in here is quite staggering. It is infinitely applicable to the worlds that you and I operate in as leaders. Now, I've written down a few points here that I wanted to cover off after reading those 2 pieces. And the first thing I wanted to highlight is that as leaders, it is our job to problem solve. That's what we're paid to do. Our job is to find solutions to complex people and organizational problems. And so it is definitely within our best interest to have a firm understanding of the direct and indirect approaches with respect to leadership tactics and strategy so that we can best accomplish that goal. That's what we're paid to do. It's what we're here for. So we're required to have a really great understanding of those tactics and the way that we might go about achieving our goals. Now, indirect versus direct is a really important concept, and it's crucial to the way that we choose to use our energy as leaders. We need to conserve our energy at times, and we need to expend our energy at times, but we need to choose very wisely and carefully depending on the context of the situation that we're in. Where possible, we want the easiest and most elegant solution to any problem that we are faced with, and we want maximum result from minimal energy expenditure. You might ask why? Why such a focus on energy conservation and the way that we might choose to spend our energy? And that's because it becomes more crucial the more chaotic the situation that you find yourself in as a leader. What do I mean by that? It's especially important to be judicious with how you're spending your energy when you are in a situation that is infinitely complex and there are multiple problems to be solved at the same time. And you don't have to think too hard about how this might apply in the corporate world if you're a leader of a decent sized team and you operate in a complex environment. Let's play with a bit of an example. If you've got several problems to be addressed at the same time, the way that we prioritize and execute becomes really, really important, okay? So from an indirect perspective, in a complex setting, we might achieve the indirect but still effective approach by using delegation of tasks, i.e., I know that the resources I have at my disposal are capable of dealing with that problem. That preserves my energy to be directed elsewhere. So we're breaking this complex problem down into smaller parts and attacking it strategically and indirectly through the delegation of tasks. There's a practical, simple example. It doesn't stop there though. We want to perhaps harness the influence of people who are more senior to us. Maybe we've put a planning case for a workforce planning situation, let's say, where we want to hire someone. And we're just, for whatever reason, not able to sell the message to the committee who makes those decisions. So what we might be best doing is leading up the chain and getting those who have more influence than we do, more say, more sway, a bigger seat at the table. Maybe we use those allies to help argue that case for us. It's an indirect approach, okay, to get the result that we want to the problem at hand. Let's talk about the direct. Sometimes there is no substitute for a direct approach to a problem as a leader. Some things you can delegate, sometimes you can lead up the chain and harness influence, but other things require your direct input. Let's have a couple of examples and discuss. Maybe you have to have a tough conversation with an underperforming employee. You don't delegate that. That comes across as you're avoiding the problem. It's bad for your reputation as a leader. You need to be seen to be willing to front up and have the honest face-to-face conversation. If you were to delegate that to somebody else, it might come across as you are reluctant to have difficult conversations. It might come across as you being incapable of dealing with difficult things, unwilling to navigate discomfort and take responsibility for a situation that well and truly falls within your remit to deal with. So we wouldn't delegate that. We would deal with that directly and expend our energy by having that difficult conversation. It might also fall under the remit of team building. What do I mean by team building? We don't delegate to those underneath us the responsibilities that come with leading a team in a team building setting. So that might be your fortnightly team meetings. It needs to be you at the front there as the leader of that team, marshalling the troops, speaking from the front, working through the action list, leading by example, being at the front. That is leadership, showing up. You can't delegate that to somebody else. Your absence as the leader of that team, your refusal to take responsibility by standing at the front of the room and talking through things and guiding the team through those catch-up meetings, that would look a little weird. So we need to directly apportion our energy to tasks such as that. It might also fall under the category of negotiations as well. There are some things that as a leader you need to direct your energy to. You need to be directly involved in things like negotiation, because perhaps not knowing the intricate details of a particular negotiation piece, perhaps not being there from a relationship building and relationship management perspective with the customer or with the partner that your organization is looking to team up with, that might come across as perhaps you don't value that deal. Perhaps you don't value that partnership enough to show up in person because you've delegated it to somebody else. That's an example where you have to be smart from a strategic perspective and go, how is the other party going to perceive this? So therefore, I would argue that when you're talking about high-level negotiations, it often pays dividends to ensure you're across everything by being directly involved, and it also shows a level of respect and a significant piece with respect to the value that you place on that arrangement. So your direct involvement and direct expenditure of energy in that context could be very, very important. So you need to understand where your energy is most usefully apportioned. And depending on the industry you're in and your role, that is something that only you can decide. I'll give you a practical example in closing with respect to how I've recently approached a very complex problem and sought to get a good result through the appropriate apportioning of my energy. So I had a workforce planning situation whereby we have a very valuable employee and we want to keep them, but they're only on a contract, a short-term contract. Now everybody sings the praises of this employee. I know for a fact that they're very, very helpful. They're liked and loved by all, including myself, who leads that team. And I got directly involved. I wrote a business case and I brought all the numbers together with respect to the external funding that we were going to enjoy over the next 3 years. And I thought that I had built a pretty good business case that would justify us converting this person from a contract role to a full-time permanent role. And their contract was actually due to end in a matter of months at that time, so I wanted to get ahead of it. And I sent that off to workforce planning. I had the endorsement of my manager, and the case was turned down with little to no explanation as to why. And it was at that point that I thought, okay, I need to pivot. I've become directly involved. I've written the business case. I've kept it just between me and my manager and the employee, and it's been rejected. As Sun Tzu speaks with respect to battlefield tactics, I had to take a different approach and I had to pivot to an indirect methodology. Instead of continuing to butt my head against a brick wall, I needed to pivot. So what I did was I harnessed other managers around me that I was familiar with. I asked them to identify gaps in their workforce and roles that this person in my team might be able to help fill. And what we ended up doing was taking a more indirect approach and harnessing the resources around me. And we created a cross-disciplinary position for this person that we were looking to retain. And basically, long story short, 0.5 of an FTE allocated to tasks that aligned nicely but weren't directly apportioned within my team, and then 0.5 of an FTE for this person for tasks that are directly correlated to the organization or the department that I lead. So a cross-disciplinary type of functionality. Not ideal, but a way to go around the problem and create a sense of this person's providing a lot more value to the organization as a whole by filling many different gaps that other managers are saying exist as well. So all of a sudden, it's not just about me, it's about, hey, this is like an organization-wide problem that this individual can help us fix. And these other managers endorse what I'm saying and will help pay for it. Now, that's an example of how you can use an indirect approach and pivot from direct to indirect, and of course back and forwards. It works both ways when you need to go around a problem and see if you can achieve a good result. Now, I don't know if that's worked yet. We haven't heard back from workforce planning, just to keep you updated, but it is, I guess, a more relevant and recent example of how I'm trying to put this sort of thing into practice. So guys, I'll leave it there. I hope that helps you. This is a special video. This is the first YouTube video whereby we're on scene at the new set, so a little bit more exciting than just watching me or just watching a photo of me while there's some audio going on YouTube. So I hope this is a little bit more enthralling to watch. And for those of you just listening to this on audio, feel free to jump over to the YouTube channel and have a look at this video if you're interested and you want a bit of a different experience to the audio only. Likewise, for those of you watching on YouTube, thank you so much for your company. It's great to have you. If you are driving to work or you want to consume this content in settings where you don't have access to video like this, maybe you're in the car, on the train, whatever, this podcast is available on all reputable podcast apps. So please feel free to jump over, download it, and consume this content that way. Guys, as I always ask, please please subscribe, please share the show with a friend, share it on your social media channels if you're getting value from this content, and I would be eternally grateful. But we'll leave it there, and until next week, I'll see you later.